Hello everyone, welcome back. My name is Aarna Sahu, host of Aarna's News, where on this podcast channel, I aim to eliminate the gender gap in the STEM fields by featuring inspiring female professionals and highlighting their stories and accomplishments to further encourage girls. On today's episode.
That's one thing I noticed very early on was about the coding on boys' toys and girls' toys. And so I have grandchildren now, and so when I've bought gifts for them, I never ever put in boys' toys when I'm searching for the boys. I look for toys, I look for STEM toys. I try to give them things that are both educational and fun. And the girls have gotten just as many building, learning types of gifts as the boy has.
Hello everyone, welcome back. My name is Aarna Sahu, host of Aarna's News, where on this podcast channel, I aim to eliminate the gender gap in the STEM fields by featuring inspiring female professionals and highlighting their stories and accomplishments to further encourage girls. Today, I am pleased to announce our guest, Karen Smiley. Karen Smiley is an AI ethicist, data strategist, innovator, and author. During a full career spanning hands-on and leadership roles in startups and large corporations, Karen built and guided inclusive teams using software and data to solve practical problems, and earned 14 U.S. patents as inventor or co-inventor. Now, as a full-time writer and consultant on ethical AI and data, Karen helps people use AI and data ethically and wisely in business and life. She hosts the weekly AI, software, and wetware interview series and podcast, and her first book on AI is planned for 2025 release. So thank you so much, Karen, for being here today. Before we dive into the questions, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, thank you. Hey, Aarna. Hi, everyone. I'm delighted to be here on Aarna's News. As she said, my name is Karen Smiley. I use she and they pronouns. And as Aarna said, I'm now writing full-time on ethical AI and data. I'm based in the USA on the East Coast, and I've enjoyed collaborating with people around the world over the course of my career. And Aarna, I love that you started at such a young age to help address the gender gap in STEM. That's awesome.
Thank you so much. So my first question for you is, tell us a bit about your career path.
Well, my path to engineering, data, and AI actually began with doing well in high school on my math tests. I had always liked math. I loved the precision and logic, and I got an amazing score on my PSAT, and my best friend did well too. So not long after that, we both got called into the guidance counselor's office to talk about career options. Would you believe that guy tried to push both of us to go to nursing school? I have great respect for nurses and their capabilities, but a nursing career really does not map to loving mathematics. And then she and I were talking about this in our speech and debate club, and my debate partner, which is a guy, didn't score quite as well as I did on math, but he did pretty well. And we found out that the same guidance counselor told him that he should pursue engineering, not nursing. So that night I went home and I told my mom and dad about this, and my dad was so mad at the counselor. And we talked about it for a few days, and we agreed that I would ask for career advice from my mom's two brothers, who both had PhDs in mechanical engineering. And I did that. And then by my senior year, I decided I wanted to major in mechanical engineering myself so that I could design solar houses and help to save the planet. And then I got to my freshman courses in engineering. We all took the same classes. And one of the classes was learning how to write code to program a microprocessor. That was my first experience with a computer. And I was immediately hooked on solving problems with data and software instead of mechanical design. But I didn't really want to give up on learning the engineering mindset of solving problems. So I looked at all the engineering majors to see which one used software the most. And I changed my major to industrial engineering and operations research. And there I studied probability and statistics. And I wrote lots of computer programs for my courses. I did do one internship as an industrial engineer in a steel mill. And then I got paid to write software for the first time to analyze ambulance data for two of my IE professors as an undergraduate research assistant. And my career has focused on working with data and software ever since then. I've written about every kind of software except for flight software. I've delivered software products and built internal analytic systems and tools across a wide range of industries. I've done consulting and conducted research, and I've built machine learning models. And as you mentioned, I've earned some patents. And I've grown and led global teams in software and AI. It's all been fun. And my latest career shift is a move into writing full-time about AI ethics and inclusion. And writing has been a wonderful way to combine all of my passions for data and software, as well as lifting up other people whose voices on AI and data deserve to be heard. And I'm working on some books about ethical AI that hopefully will be coming out this year. I have published a lot of papers, but officially becoming a book author will be a first for me. And I know you've already published a few books yourself, Aarna, which I think is just awesome. I love that for you.
Thank you so much. I love you like how you shared your journey. Like you basically like highlighted that you if even if there were naysayers, you still did things that you enjoyed and you kind of did things here and there. You dabbled and you experimented with the things that you love and you didn't like shy away. And I think that's really, really inspiring. And I think that's a cool message that we can share with my audience here. All right, so this is a great segue to my next question, which is what advice would you give someone wanting to pursue a career similar to yours, and do you have any tips to succeed?
Sure, I can think of three tips to share. So my first piece of advice would be to stay curious and learn how to learn, because technology is not going to stop evolving, and you shouldn't either. And you should probably expect to reinvent yourself multiple times throughout your career. No role or industry has to be forever. And what I found is that finding ways to apply in a new domain what I learned in another domain is really a boon for creative problem solving. And no matter what you choose to do, but especially in STEM, you will need to keep learning for the rest of your life. So you might as well get good at it, right? So spend some time to think about how you learn the best and figure out how to enjoy it and do it well. And that may mean online courses, classes with live instructors, hands-on lab exercises, podcasts, videos, reading. Everybody learns differently. So learn what works best for you and use it. So that's the first tip. I think the second tip would have to be on what to learn. And accept that you can't learn everything about everything. And you might be tempted to try, especially if you're incurably curious like me, but you'll probably burn yourself out trying. So don't do that. Instead, sketch out a plan, a learning plan that covers two things: what you want to know a lot about and why. So where you want to go deep and how deep you want to go. And then what you want to know a little bit about and why, and where to go wide and how wide. And then just revisit your learning plan every year or so whenever you need to. And you should definitely do this as part of managing your own career. It's great to get advice from a personal board of advisors. And if you can align your learning goals at work with your personal goals, that's obviously ideal. But the best person to manage your learning and your career path is you, and not a series of managers. You should drive it yourself. So my third tip then I think would be to really make sure that you understand a problem that you want to solve and why it matters and how that situation came to be before you dive into trying to solve it with technology. So learn how to ask questions with curiosity and in a constructive way. Ask what if and ask what they call the 5 whys. If you build a beautiful solution to the wrong problem or to a problem that doesn't really matter, then you haven't added any value to the world. And your solution might even break something that you didn't even realize was a factor, and you may make the world worse. So try to make it a habit to define what you think the problem is and get feedback on it, and write down your assumptions and question them periodically. Because the sooner you can identify and fix a wrong assumption, the better off you and your customers will be. Now, having said that, sometimes the best way to test your assumptions and your understanding of a problem is to put together a quick throwaway prototype of a possible solution and get feedback on it. Just be aware that it might be tempting to not throw away a prototype that was intended to be a throwaway. This happens a lot in software. Prototypes are not products or solutions, though, and you can get yourself into a mess by slipping into treating them like they are. Usually it's best to keep prototypes as simple as possible and use them to learn about your problem and then move on. And sometimes just drawing a sketch on paper by hand is good. And in general, doing the simplest thing that could possibly work, that's an agile phrase, but it's a good general practice for anything that you do. It's unless your only real goal is to learn a new AI or ML tool, don't force it onto a problem that really may only need basic statistics and graphs in order to be solved well. Just keep it simple.
Absolutely agreed. And I really like the points you said, especially like I'm gonna hone in on the first one. I think it's really important for everyone to realize that we are all different. Like we have different strengths and weaknesses. And I think a lot of us, we tend to focus on like the weaknesses and trying to level them up. When in reality, I think the best way to go is to play to your strengths. And, as you said, like find what you're good at and pretty much just run with that instead of like trying to model yourself after someone else. Like they have other strengths and, those might not match up with yours. But I think what we should realize is that in life, in your career, or whatever it may be, like playing your strengths, I think is arguably the better way to go because, everyone's unique and we all have different things to share.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a really great point. I think that if you look at the way that people learn, for instance, I'm much more of a reader, and I think you said that you're not so much of a reader. So you should focus, yeah, getting better at reading might be helpful a little bit, but don't spend all your time on that. Spend some of your time on capitalizing on your strengths and the ways that you do learn effectively and make good use of that.
Absolutely agreed. And my question for you is, what is a common myth about your profession that you want to debunk?
Wow, one of the biggest myths, I think, is that women can't cut it in STEM. I don't know if you've seen, there's a famous XKCD cartoon that shows a man at a whiteboard doing math, and there's a guy with him that says, "Wow, you suck at math." And then the next panel shows a woman doing the same math, and the same guy says, "Wow, girls suck at math." So it's this whole stereotype, and it's not fair, and it's actually not even true. There was a global study back in 2014 that showed that women's scores on standardized math tests aligned with the degree of overall gender inequality in the country. In the countries where they had good levels of gender equality, math scores were very similar for the men and the women. But it's that kind of attitude about women that is so unfair and still so pervasive in the US and elsewhere, and especially in STEM. And what might surprise people is that both men and women have these biases. We grow up with them. It's the water we swim in, and we may not even realize it. So the first step to addressing these kinds of biases is just to be aware of them, and then you can do something about them. But I've met so many women who excel technically and as leaders, and I've also met many men who excel. But what has concerned me is that I know so many women who have left tech careers or not started one in the first place because they've been pushed out or cut down or shut down or disrespected. People learn by making mistakes, and women often don't get the same leeway to make mistakes that men do. And we still don't get a fair shot in many organizations. And it is just way past time for that to change. I mean, we have some huge technical problems to solve in this world, and we as a society really cannot afford to keep pushing away capable women who could help to solve those problems.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the point where I haven't seen the exact like example you said about the whiteboard with the man and like versus the girl thing. I haven't seen that, but I can definitely relate because if if I think that like I'm not good enough at something, I would probably assume that like the entirety of like people just like me aren't good at something versus there's like that mindset shift between someone else who's probably like a guy who probably thinks, okay, I'm not good at this, but I can do better. Like I feel like that type of mindset that we've grown up with is very like humbling and very belittling. And it's important to recognize that like sure, society might be saying this, but like we're moving forward. These are modern times. We definitely go from this to somewhere else. And I think just keeping that in mind is very, very important.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot of it is confidence, and some of that is just what we hear over the years, even starting at very young ages. And it's something that, well, again, I think we have to focus on helping ourselves and helping other people to be aware of it. And that's how we start to counteract it.
Absolutely. And I think like a way that a lot of people see this at a young age is like through media, of course, but also there have been studies where like younger boys, they have toy trains, they have like Legos, they have all these like cool like building things. And then girls, they have like kitchen sets, they have dolls, they have like makeup, which is still cool. It's really nice, but it just like it goes back to okay, guys have more like hands-on things and then girls they don't. So that's kind of what fuels a little bit to that.
Hmm. Yeah, that's one thing I noticed very early on was about the coding on boys' toys and girls' toys. And so I have grandchildren now, and so when I've bought gifts for them, I never ever put in boys' toys when I'm searching for the boys. I look for toys. I look for STEM toys. I try to give them things that are both educational and fun. And the girls have gotten just as many building, learning types of gifts as the boy has.
Love that. And my question for you is if you could step into my shoes or younger self, what would you have asked yourself that I didn't?
Oh, that's a great question. I guess I would say, are there any things that you do outside of STEM that you think have helped you in your STEM career? I think that would be a good question. And my answer would be yes. I think music, for one, music is actually very mathematical, so maybe I shouldn't count that. But I do think of it as being separate. I do know a lot of software and data people who are very much into music. And I always loved listening to music on my headphones while I was coding. And I think in general, just learning about domains outside of technology will help you to see patterns and see ways that solutions in one area of life might be useful in another area. We see this sometimes today, even in biologically inspired technology solutions. And I once learned a systematic innovation method called TRIZ, T-R-I-Z, that tries to capitalize on this concept of applying solutions and ways of thinking from one domain into another. It's pretty cool and pretty useful.
Yeah, and I think the point you said is really cool because a lot of people think that humanities and STEM, they're just separate spheres, which is not true. Like you can, as you said, there's like a lot of mathematical stuff in music, but there's so many ways that the two fields and like not even these two, but like so many different ways and domains of like STEM and humanities that intersect. And I think if you're open to that, then you might see, oh, like if you're interested in two different hobbies, like how can you combine that to something else? And I think just being open to that is pretty cool because you never know what you might see and pick up.
Yeah, definitely. And that's I actually prefer the acronym STEAM to STEM because of the aspect of the arts. Because I think one thing that is overlooked, and there's actually some jokes about it, that engineers are not good at communication, but being able to communicate with art and with words is so important to actually connecting with people and understanding problems and being able to solve them. I think it's a shame that it gets overlooked. It wasn't a big part of my engineering undergraduate education, but it's something that I've actively tried to build because you start to realize it's, some point in your career that being able to really talk to people and understand what problem you're trying to solve. And I've seen some people that have done this brilliantly just by drawing, there's some great even cartoons that just point out some things and communicate them very simply and very clearly, and people get it. And you want people to get it. You want them to understand what you're talking about. So learning to communicate, and whether that's through words or pictures, is actually really important. That's not something that's really taught as part of an engineering school.
Absolutely. Like there's this thing that comes to mind. It's called Spirograph. It's kind of like a game. It's like an art thing where like you have a bunch of different like shapes that you can make like mathematically and you like stencil it out. So it kind of shows like the math and shows the art. That's like what I thought. And it's funny because like when I was a kid, I took STEAM, which is a class at my middle school, right? And I thought, okay, I get the science, tech, engineering, and math part, but I was always curious as to why they included the A, which was arts. This was like sixth grade, seventh grade, and I didn't really understand it until I actually took the class, and I was like, wow, like there's so many different ways that, technology intersects with art, that math intersects with art, and like, yeah, there's just so many different examples that you don't really realize until you start to actually pick up the pieces.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned Spirograph. I actually had one when I was a kid too. That toy's been around for a long time.
Yeah, yeah. And my next question for you is what are the best resources or books that have helped you find your career path?
That's hard to choose. Actually, I mean, I was a voracious reader as a child. I just loved reading, and every summer I'd go through in just a few days as many books as the library would let me take out every week. And I read lots of fiction and nonfiction, and I probably read some books that were way too old for me. But my hometown was very homogeneous, and I just loved reading about other cultures and other countries and other people's experiences. And it helped me realize that there was so much more out there in the world that I could do that most of the people in my small town didn't even know or think about. And I remember especially being inspired by a biography of Marie Curie that her daughter wrote. And I think that book is what really opened my eyes at a young age that, yes, there would probably still be some extra obstacles in a career in science just because I'm a woman. But she showed that a woman could do it and do it well. And I found that was very inspiring.
I love that. I think just exposing yourself to like different like avenues of learning, because I think like a bunch of students my age think that like once we graduate, there's like no need to learn. Like, and there's no way to learn, right? Because you go to a school like 7 hours a day, but there's actually so many places like listening to podcasts, like just like this one, going to the library, like picking up things here and there that you wouldn't normally think to pick up. Like if you just expose yourself, or if you keep yourself open and expose yourself to these types of learnings, then like you're already educating yourself. Like you don't have to go to school to learn this stuff. So I think just being open to that and realizing that you actually can be open to learning um, outside of school is pretty important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's great to try new ways of learning. When online learning courses first came along, I was like, I don't know about that. But then I tried one and I found that there were some ways in which it worked for me. And so I've done those off and on over the last several years.
Hmm. And my question for you is, what do you think is the vital factor that shaped your career? What was your life before learning it, and what was your life after learning it?
Hmm. I think I'd point to my experience in a company called Broadband Technologies. It was a telecommunications startup in the late 1990s. And one aspect of that role, the fact that it was a startup, is that BBT had a very clear and compelling mission to bring fiber to the curb so that everyone could have good and affordable internet access. At the time, that was pretty much up in the front. And everybody in the company was committed to that one mission. And they had built a truly amazing group of very talented, experienced people across the board. And it was the least political place I had ever worked. And it was a revelation. It was such a joy to have that environment and that culture of trust and that sense of truly being on the same team. And the second aspect of that role that stands out to me is what I learned about inclusion. I joined BBT as a manager to build what we called a development integration team from scratch. And my director fully supported me in building a team that was diverse in many dimensions. And not just because being inclusive is the right thing to do, and it absolutely is, but because we needed people with diverse experiences to be able to identify these potential integration gaps and to communicate well with the developers and the test team and the PMs, everyone. And the diversity of my DI team made a real difference in our product. And after my time at that startup ended and I moved into new leadership roles, I committed myself to trying to build that same kind of culture and inclusive environment for my teams. There is a saying that when you're trying to build a product, the first thing to build is trust. And I believe that is so on point and so important.
I love that. And I think this kind of goes back to what we were saying originally, like in the beginning, that we are all like unique and we have different strengths. So instead of like trying to mold yourself into like the person right next to you or like, other person to the side, you should just like play to your strengths and play to who you are because you're going to be valued wherever you go. And there's like this thing that comes to mind where when you're trying to build a product, you want to realize that your target audience is probably not who you are, but rather you should build a team that kind of comprises those same values as like the person you're trying to build the product for. And I think that's pretty important.
Yeah, that process of discovery about what your customers really need, it's actually kind of dangerous even in software because software people tend to think if I'm building a tool that other software developers will use, I know what they need. And you can be so wrong. It's really important to think about, you know, and get direct input as much as you can from the people who are actually using the tools now or struggling with not having the tool. What are their pain points and what makes it hard for them? And they will always know something about the problem that you don't because they live it every day and you don't. So even if you think you have had that role or you had it at one point, you were in it 5 or 10 years ago, that doesn't mean you know what it's like now. And so really just questioning assumptions and really getting to that understanding of the problem, that's just essential.
Definitely. And because we have some additional time, my last question for you is what's one thing you wish you had known when you began your career?
I think that the initial progress that I was seeing with women and other underrepresented groups making headway in STEM careers in the world, that it was going to face a lot of backlash and it wasn't going to sustain itself. I think things looked like they were on a positive track and I thought it would keep going. And it's decades later now, and we are still swimming upstream against very heavy currents, and it's so tiring. And I really hate that my and everyone's daughters and nieces and granddaughters and others still do not have equal opportunities and rights in our society. So I guess the obvious question then is, what would I have done differently if I had known? And I hope that I would have become more of an activist sooner, not just internally within my companies, which is where I tried to focus, but externally as well. I think I would have looked for supporting organizations and gotten more involved sooner. And I'm trying to do that more now with actively supporting other women in AI and data, and to elevate the voices of people around the world about AI, and to raise awareness about ethical uses of AI technologies that don't unfairly disadvantage people. As they say, it's like planting a tree, right? The best time might have been 20 years ago, but the second best time is still now.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Karen, for being here today. Before we end off, do you have any last words to the audience?
No, I think just that this is an awesome series that you're doing, and I think that anyone who can help to bring visibility to these gender gaps, I mean, it obviously hurts individual women, it hurts people in other underrepresented groups not to have the same opportunities, but it also hurts us as a society. We're losing out, and we really can't afford to. So everything that we can do to give people opportunities that they can then capitalize on and help to contribute to society is a good thing.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Karen, for being here today. I absolutely love talking to you. Thank you.
Thanks. It was my pleasure, Aarna. Thanks for inviting me.
Thus, that concludes today's episode. If you want to know more about how I relate to these amazing topics, then stay tuned for upcoming episodes. A free way to support this show is by leaving it a 5-star rating and a review on the player you are listening to. Let me know what you enjoy about this podcast, as it's a chance to tell me what you love about the show, and it helps others discover it too. Once again, thank you for finding me, and I hope we stay in touch with each other. Dito, you're listening to Aarna Sahu, the host of Aarna's News. Toodles!